Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode here on My Line Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Crone, and I have a really fun guest here with us today. I have Dr. Amber Kirk, and I'm going to learn all about Amber alongside of everyone who is listening. Amber, why don't we just hop right into it? Where are you calling in from today, and what are you grateful for?
I am calling in from Squamish Valley. So I'm nestled in the woods about 30 minutes north of Squamish. I would have to say I'm incredibly grateful for oranges in winter because growing up, my grandparents used to say it was a real treat to have an orange. So I
Mm.
actually really reminisce on that. And then I get to hang out a lot in the Squamish Valley, in the forest with really great friends and family.
I love that. You're creating such a visual with the orange. So such a cool way to kick off the podcast. Okay, so you're in the Squamish Valley. Now, a way that I love to just open up these conversations with people, and it has to do a lot with my curiosity and my own experience, is I used to teach high school. And so I saw that there was a lot of pressure with students in grade 12 to make this decision. What are you going to do for the rest of your life? That my own experience as well. At 18, I'm like, I'm expected to know what I want to do. And the work that you do in this world, is this what you always knew you were going to do? Or can you start to paint us a picture of your journey right up until like where it is that you are now and what it is that you're doing in terms of your work now?
Yeah, for sure. I grew up always being interested in healthcare and medicine. I was really fascinated with pediatrics. I was a swim coach. I taught kids how to swim. I loved working with kids. They were just super fun. They were free, they're adventurous. And I just had this real obsession with how does the body work? And I used to just find going by hospitals and going to doctor offices just really incredibly, I was just so curious about how all the parts worked of that system and the body.
Mm.
And I had a lot of health challenges growing up, and I was not gaining the results that I had expected because I fell under the guise that healthcare would make you healthy.
Mm.
On the flip side, I had grandparents that my grandfather bred thoroughbred racehorses.
Okay.
And I grew up with a very holistic approach on a farm where he would have remedies that he had learned from just historically growing up across the prairies and working in barns. And he got so good that he actually then went into the Hall of Fame for horse breeding. And we
Cool.
used to have all the vets come out to the track that couldn't fix things. And he used to always say to me, just go in to the industry that sells white pills because you're going to make a ton of money. I unfortunately was more interested in how nature worked with the recovery of an ecosystem. And because I'd had health issues growing up, and because I had a pretty bad injury with my back when I was 18, it
Mm.
then started to curb me from going more from a reductionist Western medical system, which was more, in my mind, a little bit more of a sick care system with amazing emergency care. And I then started going more into the natural healthcare system. And so then, as that kind of started to gain momentum, and I got educated, I just started to put more pieces together. My experience, I have 25 years of clinical experience, and most of my kind of experience with my own personal success with my health has just been constant trial and error with a constant drive of curiosity to learn as much as I could, mainly to fix my own things. And
Mm.
I kept pushing because of the shortcomings that I would come across within a clinical setting where it was just these constant moving variables. And each person was so different that I then kept having to pursue deeper and deeper into getting information and getting educated and
Mm.
observing more natural systems essentially.
This is all really fascinating. And I think it's so cool when it's like your passion for helping people and health, it sounds has always been there. And then it's been a journey of, okay, but there are so many ways to approach this. What's the fit that works for you that's going to keep you happy and also keep you curious? I'm interested to know who exactly are you working with now? Do you work with everybody? What do people come to you for? What do you feel like is your secret sauce? This is your jam. If all of your clients, patients came to you with this thing, it would light you up.
I would honestly say I think my secret sauce is that I've been smacked down so many times by this journey and had to get up and figure out what the hell just happened to me and figure out how can I simplify this? How can I make this effective? How can I make it free or cheap? And I think that became more of my jam. And I just would then attract a whole array of clientele from infants to the teenagers to the perimenopausal women to the Red Bull athletes to the
Mhm.
Olympians. And I think because I just could pick up where a lot of people's ecosystems were stagnant or really challenged because I have experienced so much of that personally, I was able then to kickstart people quicker and simplify on more of a hunter gatherer basis as to here's the foundation, here's the premise, here's our basic makeup, and just a plug and play at that point.
So, would you say that your body of work is people are coming to you, and then the way that you're supporting them is through both like diagnostically, like looking at what's going on in their body, but then treating them with some sort of supplements or herbs, or is it hands on? What's your approach?
I like to start with a foundation that's very primitive, that's very basic. So everybody gets the lowdown on you need to get outside, you need sunshine, you need hydration, you need the exercise, the food, so that everyone feels okay, I have this Ferrari, I just don't know how to drive it. And so there's some real basic premise to owning a Ferrari, but it's not the Ferrari that's going to perform, it's the driver. And
Mhm.
so once I start to see where some of the pitfalls are with the driving skill, I start to implement more skill based, whether it's breathing or walking or muscle gain or mind control or cruising the cosmos with theta brain waves. So I figure out where they're at and what kind of skill set they need. And then I can get into food choices, supplements, going right up to regenerative medicine with, say, peptide. Then I really am a hands on practitioner. So, because I had so many challenges and I kept getting really formally educated in a ton of stuff, my shortfall was that I didn't have this foundation as to why do people that cross the Australian outback, why do they have no white pills and why do they have no chiro and they have no naturopaths and they have no emergency medicine, the same as the tribes that are in, like, say, Papua New Guinea or in the Amazon. And I started then to just get a really good foundation. And so it was through that where I saw that they manually adjusted each other. So I will still manually move people. I will still get in the rib cage. I'll still open it up.
Mm.
Then I get into brainwave entrainment. And so I'll get their breath mechanics down. They'll get lessons. I'll free up the diaphragm. The diaphragm gets quite stagnant. There's a lot of scar tissue. And so that can really hinder then breath work or breath control.
Mm.
And then because the depth of brain waves that I am able to get into, I then will entrain someone's brain waves while they're working with me to start to feel more states of a depth of the parasympathetic is curated either through a lot of meditation or a lot of time solo outside, or even like people that get into a lot of plant medicine journeys.
Oh my gosh. I have so many questions. I have so much to say. I'm like, my brain is, I don't even know where to begin. I think, okay, someone like myself, for example, I've sat with different plant medicines and I understand on a very simple level how we can move from a beta brainwave state to alpha to gamma to theta to delta, the different wave states. I understand that. For our listeners who might be like, what? I had no idea that there was different brainwave states. Okay. So perhaps there's listeners who are feeling this way. Do you get people who come to you and they're like, okay, Dr. Amber, I heard you do amazing work. Here's my problem. You tell them, okay, we're going to start with this holistic approach and you need to get outside more and move your body and breathe. And do you get pushback from people? Because as a Western society, this is just my perspective. As a Western society, people want a fix now. And I can imagine that some people might be like, what the fuck do you mean? Go for a walk in the woods to cure myself. Now, I believe that because I love nature and I believe nature is our greatest medicine. And I have that belief built in. But if I didn't have that belief built in, do you get pushback from people who are like, really, this is how we're going to start the healing process? Or do you feel like you attract everybody who's, oh, yeah, I get this. It's my vibe?
It depends on how hard they've been spanked by their journey and being on earth. And what I mean by that is if people come in and they're like, man, I have this issue and I've heard you're pretty good with this and I've been working at this for quite some time, they typically are consumers who've been like getting educated. There's so much information now on podcasts and online, and I can just plug in where they're at. And so because I had to go from like a real Western formal biomechanical nutritional education right across to the kind of more brainwave entrainment, energy work, shamanic work, I then realized that was a circle. And then I just plug and played where an individual was on their journey. Now, in saying that, when I first started, so I was like in university in the late 90s,
Mm-hmm.
and people were like, what do you mean you're going to be a quack? What are you talking about? You're going to be this like weird doctor? And I was like, listen, man, the education hour per hour is the same as a medical doctor. I just get really heavy into like orthopedics, radiology, exercise, nutrition. And we had so much data and research out at that point, but it wasn't really trending and people
Mm.
weren't sick enough. And so they were really in a paradigm of health comes from a bottle. And we had all these things that were told to us, get outside and get morning light and go for a sauna, but people just didn't buy into it because we didn't have almost like the mechanical breakdown. So
Mm.
it was like the
Mm-hmm.
more education I received, the more compartmentalized, the more label that it became. I then paid a ton of money for that. And then I had to pay a ton of money to go back down the other side to decondition, get all the labels removed, to realize, oh, now I'm a translator. All I'm doing is translating. So if
Mm.
somebody comes into me and they want to pull like this woo shit or alternative stuff that I'm like, anyways, it's called healthcare, I
Mm.
will go into quite in depth, like neuro breakdown as to how they're coming up to that belief and how they're utilizing their nervous system in, say, like a higher sympathetic tone, and they're more emotional and their attention network is offline and the default mode is tripping and they're a self-critic. And because I can go into more of that in-depth translation, there's
Mm-hmm.
more buy-in because they then have more information. But it's
Right.
still, it irritates me to no end because I'd rather say to someone when they come in, hey man, get outside, go have fun, go get a motorbike, laugh with your friends, drink some water, go swimming in the river, like super old school. But the amount of people just don't buy in yet because they've been so conditioned with the complexities as to how this whole thing is actually made up, essentially, this ecosystem.
There's a collective energy that people are taking life so seriously, taking it so seriously. And in that seriousness, there's a level of control. And then that level of control is causing stress, and stress is making people sick. And yeah, I love what you're saying here. Your approach, like, yeah, swim in the river, listen to music, drink some water, do these basic things. And I think my own self, I think about how I can overcomplicate that. I'm like, and there's a lot of information out there. So it's, am I taking the right supplements? Am I taking them at the right time? And is this the food I'm supposed to have at this time in my cycle and at this age? And there's just so much happening out there What's your take on that? Of everybody has access to the World Wide Web and they can go be little doctors themselves on their phone. What do you think about that?
It's such a fair point. First off, I always really enjoy now when I have conversations with people between 20 and 35, because I can say, hey man, go get a suntan. And they're like, yeah, vitamin D. And they just get it. The people that are over 40, they're combative. Like they want to get in, oh, you sure about vitamin D? And what about this? What about that? And so you can tell what generations have been more conditioned and which ones the fear-based marketing has really impacted. And so
Mm,
one subset of group of individuals, I have to like decondition more with more wow factor, more details. The other group I just encourage. I'm like, fuck, go have fun. It's a good time, man. You don't know when you're leaving. It's all going
mhm,
to be okay. Just go to bed early, get a good sleep, avoid the dark, heavy shit. And
mhm,
they're cool with that. So
mm,
it's interesting because just even age wise, there is a difference. And I think as far as like consumers getting information, I think it's great. I think if we keep going back to a big premise that I really like to educate my guys on is the nervous system is an electrical system. And we were educated, we had a lot of neurology, and we were educated that it was like automatic. Don't worry about it. It's all taken care of. It's called the autonomic nervous system. So I was like, sweet, it's autopilot. Don't worry. It's now turning out that is an automated system. If you are crossing the outback in Australia, it will automate in your favor because you have to learn to go so deep into the parasympathetics and relax. And you're so overstimulated by nature that you will get the results that you're looking for: health and longevity and deep sleep and creativity and connection. Whereas
mm,
when you take that nervous system and you put it into an industrialized modern society, a high school is a great example. If you get people to sit for academics, is going to put you into a banana shape for a good 12 years. If you're pinned against each other where you're competing and maybe you're critiqued, you're judged, you're sucking it up, you're sucking it in, you're getting
mm,
images now from social media, that's going to perpetuate a sympathetic tone. And the sympathetic tone is then going to really upregulate a self critic, which is going into the default mode network, which is that's supposed to be like your friend to narrate yourself, but be more aware of the environment. Your attention network is going to go offline. Your salient network, which is what's of interest, is going to go offline. And electrically, the whole system kind of pivots on you without you even realize what you're living in. We then have
mm,
something like the habenula, which is motivation loss. So you can be all excited to go do something. You're in a relaxed state. You're creative. You're at the river. You're like, oh, I just got a great idea. I can't wait to go home and do this. You go to do it. And all of a sudden you have no motivation to do it. That's the habenula in the brain that's at work. So when
mm.
we have these two distinct electrical systems, I think the real first go-to for any consumer that's doing their doctor online, like looking up stuff, is regulate your nervous system, hit the parasympathetics, slow exhale, box breathing, sigh, hum, nasal breathing, belly breathing, sticking your guts out like a little kid. Every kid does that comes to the planet. Then you can go stand outside, get some tan, watch funny things, joke with your friends. That's going to turn on the whole electrical system that gives you great access to creativity, to downloads, to navigating, to say, hey, you know what? Cold kale is not for me. And the Debbie Downer on the curb every fucking morning at recycling, hard no. And you then start to have a way better navigation when you're in
Mm.
the right branch of the nervous system.
I love this. What's your take on plant medicine?
I think it depends where you're at. So I like to say to my clients that, so when my daughter was, I think maybe about 7, she was asking me one day about a little boy like punching people in the face at the playground. And she was like, why is he punching everyone? That's not really cool. And I said, well, I don't know. It seems like we come to the planet with some black glitter and the goal is like, get rid of it. It's like trauma. It's ancestral trauma. It's from in utero. you either get rid of it and you score some points before you leave, or you pick it up. And so I asked her, where do you think it's coming from? And she was like, oh, maybe the dad or the brother, like they're mean. And I said, yeah, okay, we're around that. Throw them some gold glitter, throw them some good stuff, and then get out of there, because it's contagious and your nervous system will entrain to that.
Mm.
So this has been historically known to be kind of history. Trauma has been known to be woven into this kind of debates, whether it's in like the epigenome, which is around the DNA, or if it's in the actual mitochondria, or if it's actually in the fifth etheric template that's off of the body. And with it woven into us, our goal is to go into the subconscious, go into the parasympathetics, and retrieve this data that hasn't been observed or processed. Now, I always call this the library. And so that you want to go into theta brainwaves to get into it. Plant medicine gives you that access to go into the library. I also call it the nightclub, because there's two bouncers. One is the superior ego, one's the inferior ego. Now, if you're not good at going into the library, they make up all sorts of things. If you get like blackout drunk and you're making a mess of your life, and then you wake up the next morning and you're like, man, I should really look into that. There's something wrong. And you go to the nightclub and the bouncers are like, yeah, no, it's not you. Don't worry about it. Like, just whatever, hit Friday
Mm.
night hard again. Don't worry about it. Or they go, you know what? I'll give her a little bit of insight. Like, I'll let her into the nightclub of terror. Let her into the black glitter nightclub. Let her take a boo. Let's see what's there. When you do plant medicine, if you microdose, the alpha brainwaves are broadening, which carry theta and gamma. So alpha is like the living room where you play music and eat food. And alpha brainwaves with plant medicine will allow you to start to slip into the library. The microdose lets you look, lets you take a peek, like, oh, what was that? Oh, I didn't realize that grade 2 teacher was actually mean to me. And maybe they were really stressed and I entrained to that, or
Mm.
the neighbor kid growing up wasn't very nice, or whatever it is. Now, when you're getting into the macro doses, it's more like they turf you into the nightclub and you get covered. And so sometimes your mind is, what the fuck? Like, this
Yeah.
is so much. Like, I'm being traumatized as I'm doing this. And then
Mm.
other times, especially when they're mixing it now with MDMA and that, they're gift wrapping it. So they're like softening the blow. So you can look at your shit, look at your black glitter, but it's not so such a slap in the face. And
Mm.
so then because you acclimatize neurologically to those states of awareness, the egoic bouncers, they start to sit down, so that as you're getting used to these environments, you then can go back and forth into the library, no big deal. And then you start to notice in your day to day that, like, I walk around my house very commonly and I go, God, I'm so annoying. And my
Mm.
family knows, don't agree with her. Don't jump on board and be like, yeah,
Mm.
you're annoying. They just let me revel in how annoying I actually am. And so when you then have that access back and forth, shit gets lighter. You don't
Mm.
take stuff so seriously, because you're just like, whatever. We are a bunch of black glitter, the dirtiest versions of these bumbling humans in this simulator Earth video game, just trying to dodge the barrels coming down from Donkey Kong. And then it just gets lighter. And then you're just like, okay, fuck it. Let's just go to the river and have some fun and get a suntan, because we all look a little bit better. Let's just eat
Mm.
some real food. And everything just comes down a notch. And like I said, I just happen to know more of the mechanical translations, but I almost wish that we didn't have to decondition so much, because it makes me annoyed that we're that conditioned with that many glass ceilings.
Oh, absolutely. It comes from so many different places. I'm curious. I heard you say you have a daughter, and do you have more than just your daughter? Do you have more kids?
No, I have a daughter and my niece. Also, my daughter's homeschooled, and so is my niece. And so we have the two of them around quite regularly. So my sister and husband live on our property.
Okay, that was literally going to be my question was, what's your take on school? Because I think that the big reason I stepped away from teaching was I loved the kids and I love teaching. I know I'm a teacher at heart, but the politics were terrible. They'll sit down for 8 hours a day. You can only use the bathroom at this time. I was like, I cannot continue to play into this system. It is absolutely it's so bad. And I don't have kids of my own yet. And people will often ask me, if you don't really believe in the school system, what are you going to do when you have kids? And I'm like, I'll figure it out, but I don't need to put them in the school system. I don't know if I'll homeschool them, but I'll find somebody to. And so that was going to be my question to you of, do you put your kids in school and what's your take on that? But it sounds like your take is get them schooled at home.
I think it just depends where you're at. Like during the COVID dark ages, when the school shut down and my daughter and niece were at home, all of a sudden I was like, wow, man, you got some like things we got to work on. I had no idea the reading level. I was just always told, yeah, she's great, she's nice, she's fun. And I was like, listen, I thought we were comparing notes here. I know that about my kid, but I want to hear the shit. Like I remember parent teacher interviews when I was a kid and you were scared. Like you were scared when your mom came through the door and you're like, fuck, what'd they say? What was my performance rated on? Whereas we just kept getting this, oh yeah, she's fine, no problem. And so then because I was then a professional in my pajamas baking cakes, figuring out where the dysfunction was within my child's like learning profile, we then realized a lot of their challenges between my daughter and my niece with their learning was they were stressed. And because I'm really like a bit of a nerd with the mechanics of how the body works, I then started putting pieces together and I was like, wow, like your sympathetic tone is like way too high. And then you can measure things like heart rate variability on kids. You can just put the watch on them for a day or half a day just to see what's your heart rate variability, like where are you actually at? And because of that, they then started to really get into learning. And we called it learning because I was like, listen, this game might be a long haul. And I didn't think I'd make it past 40 for some reason. I was very short sighted and I'm almost 50. So I'm like, you better learn. If you don't learn about anything, it might be a little bit of a disappointment. You might get caught up in some traps if you're not learning something like a hobby or just whatever facts. And so they then started to really pick up the pace with their learning. And because we really can condense the workload from four mornings, like 8:30 to kind of 12:30. And then they get the afternoons off. And then Wednesday's like adventure day. And so because we live in Squamish, we're like always doing something like sport wise and outside wise. And so we got addicted to the university style of get your shit done and then you play. And so because that was really a big part of, I think a lot of people can be very successful based on their level of focus. And so I wanted them to focus. And so that just became that part of that concentrated morning routine. It's something that works for us. I know I hear a lot of kids in my office that, they like the social aspect of going to school, which is totally understandable. And it's so friggin' expensive living on the West Coast here that like most people, there's two people working in a family. So I think it just depends. But I think as our education system is getting pushed and the healthcare or the sick care system is getting pushed, it's going to create change. There's going to be bright lights that pop up and say, hey man, let's do it this way. Let's do it that way. And it's a bit of a renaissance, which I'm super excited for because people are now learning and being creative outside of these very fear-based conditioned infrastructures.
Yeah, I too hope that in my lifetime I get to witness that change that's happening, especially in education. It is something I'm really passionate about. And yeah, I hope to be able to see, wow, they've really realized this has to crumble to the ground and be rebuilt back up. I do have faith in the generation that's coming up, like the teenagers into their early 20s. I'm like, oh, you guys are so much more open and like to your point, what you were saying, that you can tell somebody's maybe like views or how they're approaching themselves based off their age. Like I was saying that to my sister actually, and one of my girlfriends. I was like, oh, I see these young girls on TikTok and they're talking about their weekend routine and they're sleeping in and they're doing their face mask and their green juice. And we were out partying all hours of the night, wake up, hungover, do it all again. And I'm like, oh, I see how there's like a different viewpoint perspective on what it means to like have fun and take care of yourself as somebody in your early 20s. And so I do see that shift happening, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. And even like When my husband and I started to even veer away from like drinking a depressing liquid every Friday and every Saturday, and I was like, this shit's depressing. And it's just been marketed and sold to us as like this fun liquid that you can go out and depress your stress and your anxiety. And then the younger generations aren't even going to the liquor stores because they're just like, yeah, no thanks. And I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, good for you, man. You didn't even have to like decondition that. You just, I don't know if it's just because they didn't get the Budweiser girls in the bathing suits, or if
Mhm.
they didn't get the party scenes that were just like the it thing. But
Mhm.
they seem to have their finger on this pulse of, yeah, not interested into the depressing liquid. And I'm like, that makes so much sense, man. So I'm super optimistic because I think there's just, if it went from, I never thought that in my lifetime that chiropractors, naturopaths, Chinese medicine would actually be more in the forefront of like health care.
Mm.
Like when the first conference I went to when I graduated, they asked the chiropractors, and it was like thousands of people in San Francisco because I went to school in California.
Mhm.
They asked, how many of you have been to jail? And I thought, what the fuck? What kind of profession am I in? Not only is my family a bit rattled that I'm going to be a chiropractor, but now I have to tell them I'm going to jail. This is crazy. And it was because when chiropractors would practice and educate people and help them, if somebody got annoyed in the public within the medical field, they would call and get them jailed for practicing medicine without a license. And that was a
Mhm.
thing. And so I went from that as the start of my career and sounding like a maniac who was talking about get outside and exercise and insulin resistance and these things like in the early 2000s, to now people have come in, and people in their 20s, I had to stop making jokes about like being a chiropractor and like going to jail or like wearing my chino pants with my bulgy muscles with the BMW. And these 20-year-olds just looked at me blankly, and I was like, oh shit, you don't even get that joke because you're not even conditioned with this shit. And so I
Mhm.
was so elated to realize that I was like, this is awesome, man, because now it's just like game on. Now it's, let's see where we can evolve this species to. And the more people that just keep broadening their brainwaves into alpha, pushing
Mhm.
into theta and gamma. I'm quite particular about curating my environment, meaning like smells, colors, my media. I only watch cartoons, and it's easy because
Mhm.
I live with small people. But the DreamWorks cartoon, they literally talk about this stuff. So I reference like Grandmaster Oogway in Kung Fu Panda 3 all the time because he's the shit. And he's actually ripping theta and gamma to
Mhm.
such an extent that he can teach Po from the other side how to rip chi, which is like the flow of energy, any of these vitality things that are so old that the samurais have used and the martial artists. And I have UFC fighters that I work with that come into the office. And my favorite thing with them is they know exactly what I'm talking about because they're drawn partially to martial arts because of the mystics.
Mhm.
The yogis get it because the yogis are drawn to the mystics because of
Mhm.
the yogis ahead of them. And so it didn't seem to matter whether you're like a samurai fan, a martial art fan, or like a yogi fan, or just a general meditation high performance person like a Red Bull athlete, they all are interested in the same thing. So that's what I run on with these guys is I'm like, listen, man, it's all the same shit. It's all going to Rome. We've just been really bad at pushing that forefront. But now that we know more of the mechanics, I'm hoping that all of that old stuff just gets a massive revival. And the younger generations, man, they seem to be really keen on it.
I love this conversation, and I feel like I could ask a million questions, and I am conscious of time, and I do want to ask you a couple things about the business side of this. And so I'm assuming that you have your own business in the work that you do.
Yeah.
And can you speak to what feels like, it's two questions here. What feels like the most exciting, energizing, empowering part of having your own business? And what feels like the challenge that you face now, 25 years in?
I think the most exciting part is that I just get to run like a maniac. I just get to run with all my ideas. In my dome, I have a human-sized cutout of Buddy the elf, where he's like really pumped, and he's my go-to. I just bring my ideas to him, and he's super pumped, and so I can run with all of that. And my husband always says to me, he's run, just run, and he just supports me running like a maniac, no matter how out there it gets.
Mm.
The irony is, it seems to keep coming back into reality. So then he's shit, there's something to this. So I think that's always the exciting part. And I think within business, what I see a lot of challenges with is that people don't have primed enough of a parasympathetic to follow their intuition, to follow their great ideas, to get that motivation going, to implement the ideas right away. And so I think that's kind of part of the challenge within the business aspect, is that if you've got too much of a sympathetic tone, you just hit walls, like motivation walls, you hit self-critic walls, you hit doubt, you hit glass ceilings, and there's a shit ton of people that will support it. And so then you got people being like, yeah, you really can't do that, and you really shouldn't do that. And oh no, I heard about Betty down the road and it didn't go so well. And it's just like getting rid of all of that.
Betty's not working towards a pension. She's doomed.
No, exactly. So that's the thing, is I think getting the nervous system primed, regardless of what you're doing in business, it's absolutely key, because it becomes a navigational as to, are you around the right people? Are you around the right environment? Are you creating space for really good ideas and then letting them go and detaching and letting shit come in like synchronistically, so that you're like, oh, I'm on the right path. I don't know. It just keeps working out and it just keeps flowing. And then the brain waves will support that, because when you're going into alpha theta, which is more of the flow state, it then will keep coming to you. And then it creates this beautiful positive neural feedback that keeps encouraging you. I think where I would say I dabble between, should I retire or should I just pin it and bust through the fucking cosmos? Like, I'm a very on off. And the retirement part sounds awesome, because I love hanging out and enjoying every single day on the planet, even if it's shit. I somehow still enjoy it. My husband's a firefighter, he's a captain in West Van. And I think because we're around so much suffering and people are leaving the planet every day, we have a very strong presence. And because we have regulated nervous systems and we're outside and we're at the river and tanning and getting our skin all super weathered, do really appreciate all the moments. And so I could retire and I could just piece the hell out it and just see how long the day actually could go. And then the flip side is then just being like, fuck it, I'm just going to thread the needle and just blast through the cosmos with this shit. So it's debatable on what day you catch me on, but that's where I get caught out. And it's honestly the caught out pieces where I get challenged. It's just more when the balance is off between the sympathetics and the parasympathetics. It's, for me, it's literally that basic.
Last thing for everyone who's listening, and then I want to hear, like, how can people find you? What do you got going on? All that great stuff. I mentioned to you before we hit record that I know a lot of our listeners are typically women who are feeling stuck in their 9 to 5, whatever stories they're telling themselves, or corporate or whatever it is, as an employee, and they want to have their own business so bad. Or women who are like dabbling with their business on the side, but they're just so fucking scared to go all in. What are like 3 things that you can come up with for somebody who wants to build the business because it's going to set them up with their freedom in their life, but they're scared? What are 3 things that you would say, with your knowledge, that people should try taking on for the next little while and see what works?
I would probably say belly breathe like your life depended on it. Stick your guts out as far as you can. And then on the exhale, bring it back in so you have a bit of a core. I would say really utilize the nervous system with like visualization and feeling, and curate your environment. So when you're breathing properly and you're humming and you're singing and you're knowing that these tools are going to bring you back into this healthy state, navigation gets way easier. You then realize when you're at the coffee shop, oh my God, that guy does websites. I didn't even see that before. He could build my website. You lay in bed, you exhale slowly, you belly breathe, you have some really lovely music on, and you go, I just had a great idea. My logo could look like blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
Every time that we go into that nervous system state, you're going to get the feedback that you need. You might even say, do you know what? I don't even know why I stay up past 9. I'm just watching a black box with blue light that's stimulating the hell out of me, eating shit food, getting all stressed out because my nervous system is watching this movie that I don't even know what is happening. It's not even real. So
Mm.
that's where, like, when you get the nervous system into more of that parasympathetic state, you lay in bed at night, belly breathe, music, turn the lights down, put a candle on, put a red light on, visualize and feel what you're after. Writing yourself a future letter and visualizing hypnosis, meditation, that's what the nervous system is doing. So you don't even have to go through all of kind of a lengthy process. You lay in bed and you see yourself doing the thing you want, feeling the thing you want, and feeling it to the extent that your nervous system goes, oh, that's happened. We're now going to filter that has happened, and our attention is going to be on that. And we're going to narrate through the default mode network this storyline. And the reality then starts to pull towards you because you have the nervous system conditioned that this is happening and you're the driver. And it's not necessarily always a personality. It's literally the person is driving the Ferrari, and then the Ferrari starts to perform and everyone goes, wow, you're so lucky. You have such a nice car. And you're like, it's not the car, it's the driver.
Okay.
So that's what I would say. Is just keep it super simple, but drive the nervous system, drive the visualization, and the feeling has to be there. So if you're interested in money, I lay in bed and it rains $100 bills on me. And I have wallpaper in my mind all over the walls that are $100 bills, and I smell it and I think, ooh, the $100 bills aren't the prettiest being brown, but I'm like, whatever. I'm more than happy to accept.
Yeah, they're raining down with the glitter as well.
It's raining down with the glitter, man. It's
Yeah.
just, it's one of those things that when you start to get into that visualization state, the nervous system does not know the difference. And when I learned that, it blew my mind that we literally can curate what we are seeing and what stimuli we feed ourselves. It's just even like on social media, I will not touch certain images because my feed is so curated that makes me feel so great. Like whether it's like colors or dolphins or little miniature cows or miniature ponies or golden retrievers. And I just won't touch anything on the screen because I don't want to fuck up my algorithm because it's really lovely for me.
Yes, yes. And I love that everybody listening is going to hear all this from somebody else, because I think that sometimes we just need to hear it from somebody else. I'm often talking about to especially our clients, you are in control. If you're going to pick this thing up, you are in control of what you are looking at. And so if you are doom scrolling and comparing and why am I not good enough or making as much money or as far ahead, then don't fucking look at those accounts. It's not making you feel good. So yes, I appreciate everything that you're saying. And I think everything that you're saying is going to be really helpful for people listening. There's something there for everybody to be able to take away. Let's talk about, where can people find you? How can they work with you? Do you work with people digitally? Do we have to be in the Squamish Valley? Let us know all the things.
So right now I have a clinic that is downtown Squamish that I'm working out of. I also have a geodome in Squamish Valley on my property. And whether people are looking for clinic treatments or geodome treatments, I also do sound baths and breath work at the geodome. And all of those are advertised on social media under my account, Dr.Amber.Kirk. So then people can find me there. I have even like a product store with a bunch of my favorite products, which is on, you can find all that stuff on my social media. I'm just in the works. People keep bugging me to do like more online stuff, like just like courses and like kind of that avenue. I just haven't got to that point. I'm just like I've done retreats. So I've gone to Mexico and I have day retreats also at the dome here. I'm eventually going to get into the digital world, but it's throwing off my balance.
Yeah.
And so I just don't do it right now because I really value having like even a family. Then that my time is spent with my family. And so it takes me a lot longer to then roll out my career goals,
Hmm.
but they're coming. So that's the best ways. Right now, I'm more in person, whether it's at the clinic or at the dome, or I've got like favorite products and that online if anyone's just even interested in just what I've curated over the last 25 years.
Okay, awesome. And for everybody listening, I'll make sure that I've got this all linked in the show notes, really easy to click and check out. I'm going to be keeping my eye out for a day retreat at your dome. That sounds
Awesome.
delicious and juicy and all the things. Dr. Amber Kirk, this has been really fun. I've loved hearing your perspective on how you approach health, wealth, life, all of the things. And I know that there's going to be a lot of value here for everybody who's listening. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And you guys can do it, man. It's just about getting this information and then starting to realize that any of the challenges that we face are not necessarily personality based, where it's pointing at you that you're the problem. A lot of the times it's just having this knowledge to drive the electrical system, and then it all opens up and then it
Mm,
starts to play in your favor. So thank you so much for your time.
yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody. And I'll be back next week with another episode.